Can start now. My name is Vanessa Pulgarin. I coordinate the Cork Smart Gateway. Good morning to everybody and welcome to this webinar on the importance of cybersecurity in SMEs. As the coordinator of the Cork Smart Gateway, I would like to make a short introduction about the initiative. So the initiative was established by the local authorities from Cork City Council and Cork County Council, and in partnership with academia partners from UCC, MTU, and Tyndall National Institute. In that sense, the Cork Smart Gateway aims to make of Cork a smart region by promoting the technology as an enabler for city and county services to solve city and county problems, to demonstrate how technologies can be implemented in different type of projects and in business models, which is like the objective actually of this webinar series. The webinar series is Innovation Through Technology. We've had 6 webinars so far. Some of them have been focused on artificial intelligence, augmented reality, cloud computing, and so on. And you can find them actually on our website, the recordings of those. And for this occasion, we have this big topic on cybersecurity. This webinar is supported by Cyber Ireland, and actually I have the pleasure to introduce Eoin Byrne as our moderator today. Eoin is Cyber Ireland's cluster manager, an initiative that was established for at a national level, cybersecurity cluster. And it's facilitated by MTU and supported also by ADA Ireland. And also it promotes and focuses research and cybersecurity skills and also industry and academia partnerships for this purpose. Eoin also has been a researcher at the Nimbus Research Center. He also has experience with European projects, and he holds a PhD on economic geography and a bachelor's degree in UCC. So having nothing further ado, I will give the floor to Eoin and we'll leave you with our brilliant speakers. Thank you very much to everyone joining us, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. We were just saying before we started that it's on mornings like today that we're all glad that we're working remotely and don't have to travel into town on a wet, windy morning. Thanks very much to Vanessa, and we're delighted to partner with the Cork Smart Gateway on this webinar, which I think the topic of cybersecurity could not be any more relevant really this week, given the HSE ransomware attack. I think we've all seen now more than ever our daily lives, our businesses, critical national infrastructure such as hospitals and our government really do depend on digital technologies. And we've seen this over the past 12 months with the move to remote working overnight. However, this disruption caused by the pandemic has left an open door for cyber criminals, and they are wreaking havoc. We've seen this internationally with an increase in phishing and ransomware attacks, but closer to home, just last week with the HSE ransomware attack. And I think we need to be clear on the outset, this is the most significant cyber attack in the history of the state, if not one of the most serious criminal incidents in Ireland in recent history. The fact that these criminals have actually targeted our healthcare sector during a pandemic is nothing short of despicable. And this is impacting patients nationwide. There's over 80,000 devices and 2,000 systems in the HSE that have been affected, meaning doctors and nurses can't see patient data, patient history, or scans. Some labs are running at, I think, 10% capacity. And this is having a bigger effect than the pandemic on some departments, such as radiology. I think one of the good things is that, thankfully, the COVID-19 vaccination program, the contact tracing and the testing of samples is still running. And then just 2 weeks ago, the company responsible for ensuring the gas supply of large parts of the US on the East Coast was shut down by another ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline. So the US now lists cyber attacks as one of its key threats, right up there with COVID-19, the pandemic, and global terrorism. The World Economic Forum has identified cyber attacks as one of the major threats facing the world and humanity. And the result of all of this increase in cyber attacks is that the global cost of cybercrime is now in the trillions of dollars annually. There's supposedly a hack or a data breach every 40 seconds. So imagine by the end of this webinar how many there's going to be. And also the average cost of these data breaches is increasing year on year. Now, You may be thinking, okay, these cyber attacks and breaches, they're mainly targeted at large multinationals, governments, but you'd be wrong. And that's what we're here to discuss today. SMEs are targets of cyber criminals, and unfortunately, they do not have sometimes the required processes and also the resources to prevent against these attacks. And the impact on SMEs can also be more severe than on larger companies, as they are more likely to go out of business. So for today's webinar, we have 4 experts from industry and academia to speak to us about why is cybersecurity so important for SMEs today? What are some of the most common cybersecurity attacks and risks for SMEs? And then where do you even start when assessing your cybersecurity needs? So what kind of steps should an SME take? We'll look at, is there any added value to adopting strong cybersecurity postures and strategies? And then how can SMEs engage with academia on cybersecurity skills and research? So first up, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Raluca Saceanu, General Manager, SmartTech 247, who are, I think, a success story of an Irish cybersecurity company that has grown out of Cork, now has operations in Bucharest, Krakow, and Boston, and customers all over the globe. Raluca joined the company in 2014 and responsible for the firm's strategy, solutions, portfolio, and their global operations. And Raluca is going to give us an overview of the 2021 threat landscape and what practical steps SMEs can take to protect their information and systems. Just before we start, we will have time for question and answers after the 4 presentations. So please do use the Q&A box to add any questions you may have during the presentations, and we'll get them to them afterwards. Raluca, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Eoin. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, and thank you very much for having me today on this very rainy morning. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Perfect. So, like Eoin said, my intention today is very simple. I want to show you how you can supercharge your security. It's true that cybersecurity is important for all sizes these days, and you've mentioned, Eoin, quite some interesting statistics. So what I want to do is, I thought it would be interesting to start with some of the facts and figures about the threat landscape, which has continued to evolve over the past few years. And the pandemic itself has brought on several unprecedented changes, and the most prominent being the acceleration of digital transformation. And as we all know, change brings novelty, and novelty brings opportunities for cyber criminals. So since the pandemic began, the FBI has reported a 300% increase in cybercrimes. And like we've mentioned today, remote workers have caused a security breach in nearly 20% of the organizations. And again, remote work has also increased the average cost of a data breach by $137,000. It's interesting to see that 47% of employees has said that distraction was the main reason for failing a phishing scam while working from home. Interestingly, and I think we all know what's happening now with the HSE, and Eoin has mentioned it earlier, 93% of healthcare organizations have experienced data breach in the past 3 years. Organizations with 1 to 250 employees, so small and medium organizations, have had the highest malicious email rate, so 1 email in 323, and 94% of malware is still delivered by email. And ransomware is something that's in the news absolutely every week. Every week that passes by, we hear about a new ransomware attack that's crippling businesses or organizations. In the case of HSE, hospitals have been a continued target for cyber criminals, even though they promised back in 2020 that they would not target hospitals. But unfortunately, they haven't kept their promise. So when we hear about ransomware, most people think of an attack that, once it happens, it just successfully encrypts an organization's data and then asks for a ransom in exchange for the decryption key. Well, ransomware has also evolved. We're now seeing strains of ransomware that I like to call multi-dimensional extortion. So for example, the HSE incident is a good example of that. So what is multi-dimensional extortion? Well, it first starts with the classic encryption of files. Then the criminals steal the files, and then they demand a payment not to publish the sensitive data. So then what happens is they turn a service disruption, which is a classic case of ransomware, into a data breach. And data breaches have more serious consequences than service disruptions, because a data breach, as we all know, can result in reputational damage, in fines, in lawsuits, and in identity theft. So then in an attempt to make the victims pay, they start publishing the data. And then they start naming and shaming the victims. Then they can even start applying more pressure by, calling and harassing employees, notifying business partners of data theft, or clients or patients, conducting distributed denial of service attacks. With all, their entire aim is to disrupt operations, but also to make sure that they get paid the ransom. Ransomware is not the only type of attack that's growing since last year, and COVID-19 has presented a significant opportunity for nation states, for example, to exploit. So last year, we've seen numerous attacks launched by state actors, China, North Korea, Russia, United States. And these state actors have devoted significant time and resources in order to gain strategic advantage through espionage, through disruption, through theft. So I recently read a study saying that between 2018 and 2020, nation-state attacks have increased by 110%. So you might be wondering, why would a nation-state attack have an implication on my business, on my small business? And I think it's really important to note that attack tools and techniques used by these nation-states often find their ways onto the cybercrime market. And more so, if your business is part of a supply chain, the disruption and the direct impacts caused by these attacks can be significant. And while we're on the subject of supply chain attacks, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because I think everybody has heard about them, especially the two recent attacks on SolarWinds, which has affected 33,000 customers, and the Microsoft Exchange one, which has affected 60,000 customers. And it's really quite worrying when the tools that we use become vulnerable, because or especially if these are cybersecurity tools, and we've heard about F5 networks being hacked, FireEye. These tools are what we need in order to trust that our data and our information is kept secure. We need to trust our suppliers to keep this information secure. But because of supply chain attacks, these suppliers can end up being an open backdoor that lets hackers into our network. And unfortunately, small and medium organizations are targets too, especially if they are part of the bigger supply chain of larger organizations. So I want to go back to a point that I made earlier, and namely that 94% of malware is delivered by email. Because it's really important to note that email continues to be the #1 attack vector that enables phishing, that enables spear phishing, business email compromise, vendor email compromise, malware infection. So if phishing is one of the most popular way to get ransomware, why aren't organizations doing a better job at educating their employees? 97% of users are unable to recognize a sophisticated email, which I think is an alarming statistic. Getting a victim to fall for a phishing attack is often the first step, which then gives attackers a jumping off point to infiltrate the network, to steal credentials, to interfere with protection measures, so to turn off AV, to turn off any kind of security measures, so not to raise alarms. They interfere with backup schedules, they deploy malware, and etc. So then they get to decide what to do with the data that they steal at their own leisure. So has phishing gotten more sophisticated and harder to spot? It's a difficult question. It's yes and no. At the end of the day, attackers still use the same tactics in their phishing attempts: brand impersonation, account spoofing, urgent language, and so forth. So phishing campaigns, it's important to know that they don't target victims individually. They're sent to hundreds, sometimes even thousands of recipients. Spear phishing, on the other hand, is highly targeted, and it targets a single individual. So hackers do this by pretending to know you. It's personal. And since we all like to share a lot of personal information out there, we're just simply making it easier for them. So let's take this LinkedIn example here. I don't know if you've noticed, but LinkedIn allows you to change your profile picture with a statement that you're open to work, or that you're hiring if you're a manager, and it notifies your network. What happens with this kind of information is, especially if you allow to put more about your skills and your personal and professional profile, is that hackers can take this information and craft a really good email and target you, for example, with a job opening, let's say, or telling you that there's multiple job openings and your CV is great, so please upload your CV here, or try to steal your credentials. So it's really important to remember that the information that we put out there can be used against us. And spear phishing has enabled another kind of attack that has become very, very popular, which is business email compromise. So think about the following scenario. Let's say your name is Robert and you work for John Smith, your company's CEO. And a spear phisher sees you on LinkedIn, and he notices you that you're friends with John. And then he follows you on Facebook and learns about your favorite sports team and reads about a project that you're working on at the office. And then the attacker decides to create an email account under the name johnsmith55@gmail.com. So while the real John is on vacation, which is information that the phisher was able to learn from Facebook, fake John sends you an email that says, okay, Robert, you know what, I'm on vacation. I really need a wire transfer of €100,000 to our contractor in Singapore for our project. Please take care of it right away. Here are the wiring instructions. My signal is quite poor in case you try to call me. Let's catch up when I'm back. Thanks a million. And you might be thinking, does this sound like science fiction? Unfortunately, it actually happens on a regular basis. So more than 400 companies are targeted daily, and 38% of the victims are small or medium-sized businesses in all industries. And now I want to talk about a very similar concept, but a much more targeted type of attack. Actually, it's not more targeted, it's just more lucrative, let's say. Vendor email compromise. So while it's very similar in concept to business email compromise, vendor email compromise focuses more on controlling payments through vendor communication. So cyber criminals hack into vendor emails or into business systems, and they just watch the transaction flow for a while, right? They collect information on the vendor, anything from invoice structures to even your personal writing style. The way you make jokes, the way you speak, the way you make mistakes. And then this enables them to take over communication later on without raising suspicions. And there's hundreds of cases out there. And unfortunately, in 2020, approximately 10.5 million was stolen from Irish businesses, including small and medium enterprises, through invoice redirection fraud. And the last example before I go on to some practical tips, which I found very creative, is this social engineering attack where hackers are posting out fake gift cards and USB sticks with malware on them as a thank you for being a customer, which once inserted into a computer, a backdoor is being downloaded and run. So the takeaway here is that social engineering can take multiple forms, and we need to make sure that we are aware of these. We need to remember that humans are still the weakest link in the security chain, and we need to remember that the information that we put out there can ultimately be used against us and against the company that we work for. So what can you do to protect your business? And I always say this: start by asking questions. Ask the right questions. What are we doing right now? What are our current defenses, our antivirus, our firewall? I think based on what's been happening now with the HSE attack, a lot of people have started asking these questions. What kind of email security do we have in place? How cyber aware are our staff? What should we do in the event of an attack? Do we have an accurate picture of our current gaps? Which information is sensitive in our organization, and how are we protecting that? And guess what? This means that you're now taking a risk-based approach to cybersecurity. But it's really important to start asking these questions and ask your employees, ask the people in your IT department. And if you don't know how to ask the questions, if you don't know what questions to ask, get help. Train your first line of defense, your employees. The same way we're training the medical line of defense, we need to train our employees, from administrative to normal users to management, because security is everybody's responsibility. And awareness training makes everybody more alert. So train your users to recognize and stop social engineering attempts, help them to understand the importance of proper password management and the risk of not doing so, and provide them with the right tools. So provide them with the password management tools. I always get this question of, how am I supposed to remember all these passwords? And you're telling me they have to be complex and they have to be 16 digits. Am I supposed to remember them? And my answer is you shouldn't have to remember your passwords, because if you remember your password, then it's not a secure password. So you need to have the proper tools in place. And there's so many great tools out there, CyberSecurity, LastPass. They're so inexpensive and they can make a huge difference. Make sure that you properly control your access. And remember that access to data and systems is a privilege. So implement the least privilege access control strategy, implement multi-factor authentication, not only on your professional accounts, but also on your personal accounts. Make sure that you check whether you've turned your multi-factor authentication on. Limit access to only those people that actually need it. And again, don't use weak or default username and password, such as username, admin, password. And I've seen this in many, many cases. Assess your vulnerabilities and patch them. Ensure that your operating systems and your applications are up to date. Get control over your devices. Run internal and external vulnerability scans, and even penetration testing, depending on the size of your networks and the type of business. Have an incident response plan, have backup in place, and try to remember that regardless of the company size, every organization needs an incident response plan. And I want to leave you with a couple of notes, and then I'm open to questions. Don't underestimate the value of your company and its information to hackers. Make sure that you adopt a zero trust approach to cybersecurity. And remember that one phishing awareness campaign a month can go a long way. I've seen companies where they think that doing it once a year is enough. I definitely disagree with that. Once a month can go a long way. Limit the kind of information that you share online and practice safe passwords. And I think that's me. Thank you very much.
That's super, Raluca. Thanks very much for that. Some very worrying statistics there around the current threat landscape. I think we're going to move on now from seeing the cybersecurity attacks and the risks that are there for SMEs to look at an Irish SME that has worked with SmartTech 247 to actually adopt cybersecurity practices and how that's actually benefited their business. I would like to introduce Barry Downs, the co-founder and director of Pluto Digital. Pluto Digital is a company in the space of cryptocurrency. They develop new blockchain technologies and hold a diversified portfolio of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin and Ethereum. But they're also, as I said, an end user of cybersecurity services. Barry himself is actually a co-founder and managing partner of Sure Valley Ventures, a venture capital firm that invests in high growth software startups in the UK and Ireland. Previously, Barry founded the software startup Feed Henry, which was sold to Red Hat for 82 million in 2014. And he was also the CEO of the leading academic software research institute, the Walton Institute in WIT. So Barry's presentation is going to address how Pluto Digital cybersecurity requirements have been implemented by Smart Tech 247. Barry, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks very much, Eoin. Let me just fire up my presentation here. Can you see that okay?
We can.
Oh, super, thanks very much. So let me just go in a couple of slides here. So I'll first of all just give a little bit of background on Pluto, and that will set the context for our kind of discussion around cybersecurity and Pluto and how we've sought to address that. So first of all, Pluto's digital assets, as you mentioned, digital assets, technology development, advisory, and specialist operator. The company develops new blockchain technologies and also holds a diversified portfolio of well-established cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, and also new kind of high-growth cryptocurrencies based around Web3 infrastructure, including the Ethereum and Polkadot ecosystems, but also with a particular focus on decentralized finance. And decentralized finance is a super high growth area of digital assets that has really developed incredibly well over the last 2 years in particular. And in particular, it's trying to remake the financial system using blockchain technology. So Pluto is an SME. It's a relatively new company as well. The company was incorporated on the 12th of January this year in London. It's gone on to raise, so it's in existence about 4 months. In the 4 months, Pluto's raised 32 million pounds, or about $45 million. Of that capital that's been raised, approximately 33 million pounds has been held in digital assets and 13 million in cash. So the net asset value of the crypto and assets is around $65 million dollars. And as a holder of digital assets, Pluto holds about 10 of the major assets. So that's Bitcoin, Ethereum, Link, Aave, for example, as well, and Polkadot. But also it's got 20 plus investments in these new emerging projects. Composable would be a very good example of that. And both of those provide different security requirements for Pluto, and I'll touch on those on the next slide. The company's on track for an IPO. Plans are to IPO on the London Aquis Stock Exchange before the end of June. And given the fact that it's holding a lot of assets and also in the cryptocurrency space, we were very aware of security from day one in the company, and in fact engaged Raluca and Smart Tech probably actually from day one to put together a program and a system for us to ensure that we were protecting ourselves to the fullest extent from cyber threats. So security is something that we talk about on every staff meeting, for example, on Mondays. So I'll just explain a little bit more about what we do, and that'll give you a sense as to the security risks that we perceive as well. So this diagram gives you an example of Pluto's business strategy. And on the right-hand side, you can see about 60% of Pluto's assets are allocated to the major digital currencies, so Ethereum, for example, and Bitcoin. And actually, the company holds about 25% of its assets in Ethereum overall. And then about 40% of its assets are held in these new emerging decentralized finance projects. And these tend to be, the difference between the two is you can typically hold Bitcoin and Ethereum at centralized exchanges. So for example, Coinbase or Kraken or Binance, whereas these new Web3 DeFi projects tend to be held in self-custody in wallets by the business. And thus that creates a whole series of additional, actually both systems create particular access control and rights management issues in general. In addition to that, just around the outskirts of that inner circle, you can see there's an outer circle, which is income generation. And one of the things you can do with cryptocurrencies these days is you can generate yield or income from those cryptocurrencies through a variety of kind of yield generation strategies. And typically the APYs that can be delivered on those can be quite substantial. They can be anything from 20 to 100% or even higher. So it's a high growth area in crypto. And then the final thing is, as I mentioned at the start, Pluto is developing new technologies as well. And those new technologies are in the kind of Web 3.0, in the decentralized finance space. And they're typically around the yield management space as well, which is a super high growth space. So that's a quick overview of the business strategy. And this slide kind of puts together how we've tried to build a platform for delivering these cryptocurrency strategies. And you'll see central in that platform is smart tech. And I guess the director's view of the business is that by building a platform for delivering on cryptocurrency strategies, that allows us to be flexible to change in the marketplace. And there's been considerable change in the marketplace this week, for example. Smart tech, other things, for example, you see here is some of the exchanges such as Coinbase Prime or Kraken, or DigiNex, which is an on-ramp to get fiat into crypto. But smart tech takes a central position in our platform. And then on top of our platform, we're running a number of different strategies, from the yield strategy to the blockchain development group, to investing in DeFi projects, to NFTs as well. And then to talk specifically about our cybersecurity requirements, when we sat down and looked at the business on incorporation in January of this year, we really saw considerable cybersecurity threat. One, because of the points that Raluca was making about phishing attempts and cybersecurity attacks are happening on a daily basis, on a very frequent basis, to SMEs, but also because we were in the cryptocurrency space as well. We saw some very particular threats there. So in terms of our requirements, we kind of identified we needed PC and endpoint protection. We really didn't have, as a startup, we didn't have the skills in-house to kind of run our own security operations center. So we were looking for somebody who could help us really run a security operations center for us to monitor all of our endpoints and all of our applications, and effectively to do kind of what's called managed detection and response. And that's a key reason we went to smart tech as well, in that they run kind of gold level MDR for some of the largest companies in the world. And so we thought that was something that would really give us a lot of confidence that we were being protected. Phishing, as Raluca mentioned, we see phishing attacks on a daily basis. We have seen since we started the organization 4 months ago, we have seen multiple phishing attacks, and thankfully none of them have caused damage to the organization. So anti-phishing, both training and methodology, and also software, I think we felt was very important. Penetration threat testing and also threat modeling we felt was very important. And then, so that's all around our physical infrastructure and our systems, even things as simple as kind of email and Word and Excel. There are some additional things that we identified for our use of cryptocurrency wallets and also for exchanges as well. So we needed, for example, different levels of approval of transactions, so multi-factor authentication. We also needed policy management around the kind of local custody wallets as well. And we brought in a solution for that. And just on the point, echoing the point that Raluca made about team member training, we see that as really quite critical, that everybody is trained on a consistent basis, and security is really at the front of everybody's mind when they hit their email first thing in the morning, that they're aware of potential issues, or when a transaction is being conducted, that we're aware of security on that as well. And so we worked with and I would say it's also a work in progress. This is a kind of an unending process to ensure that we don't get compromised. But we've worked with Smart Tech since day one. And without giving a promotion for the guys, we found them to be fantastic and very supportive of us. And what they really helped us do was put in place an end-to-end cybersecurity solution for us. And that really even went to, Pluto's got, even though the core team's based in London, we've got people across the world. So we've got somebody in Tallinn, we've got people in Ireland, we've got people in New York, and also in Vancouver. So it's quite a distributed team. So even from the extent of, getting PCs purchased in country, sent to the people who are all working remotely at the moment, and then having, configuring all the back-end systems, and then doing a simple install once the PC arrives, and setting up all of the systems in a kind of a lockdown fashion, so that, in fact, Smart Tech are operating at the moment as our sysadmin as well. And really locking down the PCs in terms of what can be installed on them, and then setting up and configuring all the back-end services such as Microsoft Office, OneDrive, and also device management software, establishing and running managed detection and response, which is really monitoring all of those endpoints in real time, and then alerting us if a problem has been found, and helping us put in place a response plan if a problem is found. Then, to things like installing and running, they've got their own anti-phishing software, which we're running, which allows us to build up organizational knowledge about phishing attempts as well. And then finally, doing things like conducting penetration testing and kind of more advanced things like threat modeling. And then finally, cybersecurity awareness training. And for example, we have an awareness training program next Monday for staff. And this is something that we're running on an ongoing basis. So part of our focus here was making sure everything's secure, everything's locked down, everything is monitored, and that staff are trained and staff are aware of security issues. That's been, super important to us. And as you can imagine, for an organization that's only 4 months, that's in a high growth area, there's a lot of priorities that we could have, but one of the top priorities that we set was to make sure that we were secure, and that we were doing absolutely everything we could do to make sure that we were not being compromised. And to date, I'm happy to say we haven't been. The final note I'll make is that on the kind of exchange custody and also self-custody of wallets, there's a number in the crypto space, there's a number of firms that do kind of application level security, including companies like Copper or Credo or Fireblocks. And we selected Fireblocks to do application level security on exchanges and local wallets. And that gives a lot of multi-factor authentication, and it also gives a lot of policy management around wallets as well, which gives an extra layer of security for cryptocurrency. So I guess that's it at a high level. We kind of see it as an ongoing core part of our business to be to be out there and to be doing everything we can not to be compromised, and also not to be overconfident about it as well, you know, to be on top of it the whole time. And we found, you know, Smart Tech, you know, have been fantastic to work with, and I don't think we could have made the progress that we have made without engaging with them. So thanks to Raluca and the team for supporting us and their continued support. And that's it.
That's great. Thanks very much, Barry, for that practical demonstration. I can see there's a couple of questions coming in there to the Q&A, so please do keep them coming. We'll move through the presentations and get to those at the end. I think I have a few personal questions for Barry around what's going to be the next Bitcoin and whether Dogecoin is a scam or not, but we can talk about that afterwards. Next up, we have Professor Roedig. So Utes is a full professor of computer science at the University College Cork. Before moving to Cork, he was a professor at Lancaster University in the UK, where he led the Academic Centre of Excellence in Cybersecurity Research. His research interests are computer networks and security, and he has published over 150 peer-reviewed papers in this field. So Utes is going to provide us with an overview of cybersecurity research at UCC and how this research links with industry, and why should industry even care and engage with cybersecurity research in academia. So he's going to outline this research in UCC and give two practical examples as well. I'll hand it over to you, Utes.
Right. Thank you very much for the introduction. So, well, as said, what I want to do here is to introduce a little bit what kind of research we do in the security domain at UCC and why that is relevant to you. So, obviously, one relevant point here is that well, we use our research as well in our teaching, right? And it is about building up skills and you know, educate computer scientists to be as well knowledgeable about computer security. Right? So that's one of the many benefits of this. So why does cybersecurity matter for SMEs, right? So I want to look first at why is that of relevance? And well, there could be three different types of operations that you might engage with. So the first one is that whenever you run any service or any operation, that you need to protect your assets. So you need to make sure that your systems are secure and protected against threats. But then, of course, there are SMEs as well that construct systems, that create software, create systems. And of course, these need to be put together in a secure way as well. And the third one is there might be SMEs that actually create solutions that are used to provide security, right? And if you are creating security solutions, then of course these need to be evolving and kind of keeping up with the threat landscape. So these are the three different areas that, depending on what your business is doing, where this the research aspect may become relevant. And so what does a university actually do then in this space? Well, what we do is we keep up with developments, right? So we look at new threats, new ways of how actually systems might be breached. We're looking at new ways of protecting systems and so on. And you know, as we are doing this, this might help you because you might not have the time to you know, spend a lot of your operational time looking into the future. So this is kind of what the university is doing. The other one is technical expertise. So you might have a particular problem, a particular challenge around cybersecurity, and what you then usually do is you look for expertise, right? And you can ask us, and we are happy to help there. And well, it's a broad field. Not every time we might have the solution for your particular question, but we usually would know who has the answer for that. So ask us, right? And we would try to help. The other one aspect that we do is to discover new opportunities. So for example, when it comes to developing new solutions, let's say you are in the business of creating new protection methods and solutions, so we can help to develop these, right? So that there's the opportunity to discover new businesses, right? So we are happy to help there. And of course, to facilitate that, we do collaborative research on cybersecurity as well. And well, governments and public bodies, that they help as well support this, right? So there are programs to support research. So if you think as an SME, this might be a too big of an undertaking, it's not always necessarily the case, right? So we can help there. So that's how kind of the research world relates to what you do. And the question then is, why do we always talk about cybersecurity, right? So this is not a new thing; it's around for quite a while, and you would think that after many years, this should be a solved problem, like so many other problems as well. And unfortunately, that is not the case, as we've seen this week. And there are reasons for that. So one of them is, and I think that in the future will bring many more challenges, is that the IT world is changing quite rapidly, right? So if you look at computer chips and where they are sold, then 99.9% of these computer chips, they go into small little embedded systems, right? The Internet of Things, small devices, not really your PCs and servers. Actually, in terms of the volume of systems, they are kind of a minority. So you will have systems that are emerging, like shown here in these pictures. So you have smart homes where you have lots of computers distributed in your surrounding. You have that in smart cities where you kind of start to automate the entire environment. You have that in factories, production lines, and as well, as shown there on the right-hand side, an aircraft engine, but you would find that in cars as well. All of our environment gets more and more automated. And of course, attackers and hackers will target these systems as well. And if your PCs and classical systems are well protected, then that this is probably the next emphasis. Right? And because as well we have these new devices and systems that we use, we also have new applications and application domains that are emerging. Right? So we just heard about the environment of Bitcoins and financial transactions in this, but you get also applications like voice interaction. You now find distributed energy systems, right, where a lot of batteries together form a virtual power plant. So these things exist. Smart cities, you have medical devices that become more sophisticated. And as this kind of environment grows, of course, the threat landscape grows as well. And another change here is we more and more rely on IT infrastructure, right? So connectivity has increased. So we have many more systems interconnected. We're always surrounded by IT devices. Yeah? Every one of us has a phone and uses this continuously. And we're using these systems as well for critical infrastructure. And so when these systems go down, we are much more impacted than we would have been many years ago, right? And so as this landscape is changing, also our ways of protecting and adapting to that need to keep track of this. So what are the things we do at UCC? So obviously you cannot do everything, right? And the area even of cybersecurity is really broad. And so there are a few things that we care particularly about it. And I try to kind of sort them and group this a little bit. So one of them is privacy preservation. So a lot of systems here nowadays collect a lot of information, right? And what you want kind of mechanisms that ensure that your privacy is preserved, right? So think about smart speakers in your home that capture your voice, right? You have a lot of tracking systems, phones that need to know where you are, and so on. And these are used in application areas like transport, health, and so on. And so what we look at is kind of what are the methods that you can implement in these systems to ensure that that privacy is maintained. I kind of talked about this IoT space, like many new connected devices that form large-scale systems, and we care about the security of these. So we look at how to take security protocols and put them within these environments, how to authenticate not only people, but also these multitude of little devices that are around. Speakers before me have pointed out that it is essential that you know as well what's going on in your system. So intrusion detection is a point here. And how do you do this in an IoT environment? Right? And we look at there as well at specific application areas like industrial control systems, smart homes, and so on. A more classical thing is system security. So this is kind of where you look at the classical PCs and environments, and you see you know, how do attackers actually get into this this environment? I will have an example there in a minute to talk a bit more in detail about that. So we look about that, and of course we do this to understand how you actually can implement protection methods. And then another area is applied cryptography, right? So it is always pointed out that, you know, cryptographic means can actually provide security, but what you need to do is you need to take these theoretical concepts and actually put them into operating live systems. And so we look at how to do this, right? How to design cryptographic protocols. There are kind of new things that are emerging, like secure multi-party computation or homomorphic encryption. So these are kind of techniques where you actually provide data to a backend in an encrypted form. So people cannot look at it, but what you can still do with the encrypted data is you can run operations on it, right? So you might do some computation on the data provided without actually knowing what the data is, and that can help to kind of provide privacy and security. Right? And we look a little bit at hardware primitives like random number generation, physical unclonable functions, elements that can be used to kind of improve security of environments. Okay, so this kind of gives you an overview of kind of what kind of things we actually do. And what I do now is I kind of pick two areas and kind of give you a little bit of a view on that. And the first one of that is system security, right? And I picked this because it has a relationship to what's going on at the moment, right? The attack on the HSE. So in this case here, you have an attack on a critical infrastructure, the health service in this case. And the question here is, how did this happen, right? And we've seen before, well, these things can happen by simple things like a phishing email that is sent, and people then you know, react to this, click on links and so on. But the question is what actually happens after that. So when you click on a link, what actually happens, right? Malware is executed, and the question is, how does that actually get into your system? And there's as well the question of, will this happen again? Probably it will. It in my view is impossible to provide 100% security. So you need to, you can do quite a lot to minimize the risk, but you can never really eliminate that. So there are the classical countermeasures, and we heard about that before today. So what should you actually do to protect your system, right? And well, they're kind of, I try to condense it into a few steps that I believe are important, right? So the first thing is you should use secure software and hardware components. That means kind of keep them up to date and use things that actually can provide security, right? To have the right components. And then of course there's best practice of how you actually take these components and put them together into your IT system to form your IT system. And of course this needs to be done in a way that you know, that encompasses best practice and results in a secure system. Yeah. So for example, how do you set up privileges, who can access what, and so on. Unfortunately, a system is not done once it's set up, right? So what you also need to do to maintain security is you need to monitor the system. So you need to monitor the security state. If you're not knowing that you're under attack, you cannot really do anything. So there's this monitoring aspect. And then you need some policies and plans, right? So you need to know beforehand what you actually will do when an attack is unfolding. Right? And well, an important part that I tend to forget. So I'm a technical person. I look at technical things, but of course there are people that interact with systems, and the the person component is important, right? So you need to provide staff, you need to provide training and support people in protecting a system. So this is kind of what the day-to-day business is in protecting systems. And the question is now, what's the contribution of research to this world? Well, and things we do is kind of, for example, to look at system weaknesses, and especially new ones, to kind of find out how a system, especially new systems that are in development, how they might be compromised, right? So to understand, before an attacker understands how this works, what may go wrong. And what we do then is we devise new countermeasures, right? And they can be ranging from systems to detect that attacks are unfolding to actually mitigation and kind of closing gaps, right? And so what research does is kind of improve these steps of countermeasures that I listed there before. Okay, and so to give you a bit of an example on something I looked recently, which is operating systems, right? Classical operating systems, in this case, Windows systems. And, you know, to understand a little bit when a malware actually arrives, what actually might happen, right? So if it's unfortunate, then a user might actually click on a link, right? And what happens then on an operating system? So on an operating system, each process, every program that you run exists in its own space. And this is done so that programs don't interfere with each other, as you don't want that, as well for security, from a security perspective. But of course, an operating system provides some functions that allow you to interact between these applications, because it would be not very useful if one of your programs can't interact with another one. So you kind of have dedicated APIs to do this. And that is fine as long as you don't have a malware link and you're clicking on that, because then your program becomes an infected program, a malware, right? And you don't want your malware to interact with your other programs that run on your system. And so in particular in Windows, there are kind of mechanisms to prevent this. So for example, you want to prevent that an infected program may interact with your antivirus program. So there are kind of so-called kernel protection drivers normally used that kind of prevent the interaction of some of your programs with these particular important things. And what we found out here is that there is actually a race condition, and you can circumvent that, which an attacker could exploit, right? And so we kind of looked at this particular area, documented that, and that feeds then back into improving the security of systems. So it's kind of a particular work looking at how malware actually operates, and kind of to help closing gaps that these programs exploit. Right, and my last one that I want to mention very quickly is I look at you know, IoT devices, and one of the things I look at is personal voice assistants. So we know them as Echo, Siri, Google Home, this kind of stuff, where you talk to these systems and they carry out actions for you. And of course, when you look at these devices, these are kind of small little computers that you place around your home, right? And of course, as such, they become subject to attacks as well, right? So someone could hack your little Amazon Alexa or whatever it is, like your smart speaker, because it's a computer, and use that then to attack your system, right? But in these areas, it is actually much more complicated. And so we look at these kind of future threats of what may happen in this area, right?
You just have 1 minute left.
Yep. And so in these systems, your voice is recorded, right? And voice reveals things like gender, age. You can have hidden commands that are submitted via audio files and so on. So it's kind of a different threat landscape. And what we do is we try to understand that particular area and then devise some protection methods for this. And that is what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
That's great. Good timing, Oots. I think it's reassuring to see the type of security research that's happening in UCC and in our universities, and the importance of that to stay ahead of the cyber criminals as well. So next up for our final presentation, we have Dr. Aoife Long, who's the Education and Public Engagement Manager for the Cyber Skills project that is coordinated by Munster Technological University. This project was awarded €8 million in funding by the Higher Education Authority, and it aims to address the global shortage of cybersecurity professionals. Cyber Skills has been designed to enhance Ireland's competitiveness around cybersecurity skills, and today Aoife is going to give us an overview of the project and how SMEs can get involved. Over to you, Aoife.
Okay, thank you, Eoin, and thanks, Vanessa, for running the slides. So yeah, so Cyber Skills, as Eoin said, we were just awarded a massive amount of funding to build this program to really respond to Ireland's skills needs. So the intention of the Higher Education Authority Fund was to, I suppose, increase the capacity in higher education to meet very specific skills needs in Ireland. So we're just getting up and running now, and I'll start plugging it from the start. We're planning a launch event on the 1st of June. And if you're interested in that, then do check out the Cyber Skills LinkedIn account to find out more about how you can attend the launch and learn a bit more about the program. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, please, Vanessa. So to talk about the skills needs that we have in Ireland. So the Cyber Ireland survey that was run last summer found that 48% of positions in cybersecurity were unfilled, and then 1 in 5 of these positions, companies take 6 months or longer to fill them. So when you have a skills shortage in cybersecurity, this makes it a lot more difficult for small and medium enterprises to compete with larger multinationals as well. So it's not just that there's a skills shortage in the country, it's that the skills shortage will affect different industries in different ways. And the aim of the Cyber Skills program is to look at upskilling people in their existing industry rather than, I suppose, training people directly from undergraduate or graduate level. So if you can move on to the next slide, please. So this is a national project with an international dimension as well. So the project partners, it's led and coordinated by MTU, but we are also going to be working with University of Limerick, University College of Dublin, Technological University Dublin to build and develop the different modules. And then the international dimension comes from linking with Virginia Tech that's based in the United States and the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative that they have based there. So this really brings the best of international and national expertise. For example, TU Dublin have already worked with SMEs and the IDA to develop some of their modules on their masters in applied cybersecurity. So if you can move on to the next slide. So just to talk about the innovation in the project. So we're procuring a cyber range at the moment, and it's going to be the first in the country. And to give an analogy of what this is, it's like going to a golf driving range. You have an opportunity to hit the ball and test your skills in an environment where there is, no actual consequences. So if you were sending somebody to upskill from your organization, they will test their skills on the cyber range rather than in your systems, which I think is quite reassuring, because the courses will really aim to build practical skills rather than just getting a piece of paper at the end. And all of the modules will be mapped to the NIST NICE framework. So NIST NICE, this is the National Institute of Standards and Technology based in the United States and the National Initiative for Cyber Security Education. And what this framework does is that it defines the different work roles that are in cybersecurity and the skills and abilities that you would expect a person who was doing that role to have. So it's written in very accessible language. So for learners and employers, it's quite easy to get an understanding of what you can expect from a person, depending on the modules that they've completed. And then the final thing is that there will be a flexible mode of delivery. So the modules can be taken either with a single module and get accredited for that specific module, or a learner can build their own pathway based on what a company's needs in cybersecurity are and respond directly to those needs and come out with a higher diploma or a master's qualification at the end. So I suppose that flexibility is really aimed at people who are already working and in employment, who are already in an existing business, and who don't have a lot of time perhaps to take on a full master's when that mightn't be something that is valuable or necessary. And MTU also have a lot of experience in this type of delivery. They've been running online programs since introducing the cloud computing program in 2011. It was the first of its kind in the world. So there's a vast wealth of experience and understanding of how to deliver online programs that I suppose predates the pandemic. So there really is a wealth of experience there. And there's about 130 graduates coming out of 6 different master's programs at MTU at the moment. So the experience really is there. But if you can move on to the next slide, Vanessa, just to talk about the unique learner pathways. So I'm going to take an example of Mary. She has a BSc in computer science, and she has been working for a small and medium enterprise, managing the network, procuring equipment, and making sure everything is running smoothly. She recognizes that there is a need to protect the data that the organization has, and she takes a module in data security to understand how to build the technical skill to protect data better, and also to develop her understanding to procure cybersecurity services as well. So she is able to get recognized for completing that particular module and then add value to her role in the business that she is already working in. And if you could move on to the final slide, Vanessa. We want to hear from people around the country. We want to hear from SMEs about what their cybersecurity needs. Again, the innovation in this course is that we will be working with industry to develop modules that will meet the needs of industry. So it's not, I suppose, hoping to come up with things ourselves. It's trying to really understand the needs of businesses. So we have a few modules that are being built already in collaboration with different businesses, and we want to hear from more, and in particular, smaller businesses, because their needs will be unique and different from larger ones, and the information held might be somewhat different. So if you want to get in touch, then please contact our project manager, Jacqueline Kyo, info@cyberskills.ie, and also check out our LinkedIn page to find out more information about the launch if you're interested in attending. Thank you.